So it took me a while to get back to this, but I already did the first part of my review of Telltale Batman Season 2, which is also known as Batman the Enemy Within. I talked about all the things I love in the game. Now it's time to take a look at the things I didn't think worked out so great in this game. This is still my favorite Telltale game of all time, so I love it. With that being said, there's a few thorns on the rose. Hey, before we get into it, be sure to like the video if you enjoy it, subscribe for more content as we move into it, and a lot of people have not been getting the notifications for uploads, they've told me, so ring that bell to actually see those notifications in the future. Let's hop into it. The first thing I wanted to talk about with this game is that on several systems there are still a lot of visual glitches that sort of pull the player out of the game if they occur. The most prevalent one that happened to me, and it happened for several minutes, was when I was actually in the car, which, by the way, full spoiler warning, we are going to go into actual spoilers for the game here, including the ending later, so I'm just letting you know right now. But when I was in the car with Harley Quinn and John Doe, who, you know what he turns out to be, when I was in the car with them, it was just gray all around me. I couldn't see where we were driving, I couldn't see what was going on, nothing. At first I thought it was supposed to be that way, and I looked it up, it's not. It's not supposed to be that way. There were some other glitches too throughout the course of the game. They weren't quite as prevalent as in the first title, where like you'd have things like Bruce Wayne dislocating his own neck to look at Gordon, but they still, when they happened, at least for me, sort of pulled me out of the game, made me laugh, and broke that immersion of what was going on. And I think it's something that with some optimization could have been taken care of, especially because there have been patches throughout the years for this game. So I'm surprised that these glitches still happen. They happen on PS4, I know some happen on Xbox, and I think there's more and more fixes on PC, but console players aren't going to have the access to that PC players will. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is the amount of characters. I think I praised the game for that a little bit in the what it did right. The fact that they do introduce all of these villains and they do a good job with it, that's definitely true. However, there's also so many characters that there's a lot that are pushed to the background that don't really matter, that don't show up very much at all. I think the biggest one I can think of is Agent Avesta. She's honestly very charming, she's interesting, and I would have loved to have like talked to her more, gotten to like experience more of the story with her, since they sort of try to play her off as a bit of a partner to Batman. But she just shows up in little spurts, barely makes any appearances, and doesn't actually matter to the overall story of the game that much. And frankly, what really disappoints me in this game is the romance options. And you're gonna say like, oh Jay, why do you care about the romance options for this fake game? Yeah, well here's the thing. I understand that, it's a video game, but they do sort of market your relationships with other characters in this game as being a big selling point, and you can't tell me that that's not popular with players when we see things like The Witcher 3, where that's one of the big selling points for that game. So for them to sort of push like the ideas of like the romance with Catwoman in marketing and stuff like that, it's great, but the romance options in this game are kind of garbage. I mean, you're expected to just sort of like pick up where you left off with Catwoman, except you don't. It's like it ignores everything that happened for a while and pretends it didn't, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, she likes you again fully, you're good. It didn't make much sense on that front. Agent Avesta would have been a great option for it, and there's little hints at it, but it never fully develops. It's even the same with Harley Quinn. I understand why you wouldn't want this, but the amount of like hitting on Harley Quinn that you do throughout this game, or can do, is pretty bizarre for it actually not really leading anywhere at all. It's just like there's a lot of dangling plot threads with those romance things, and that sort of ties into this amount of characters, is there's so many, they don't know what to do with some of them. Gordon is like written out of the game almost. He's just gone for most of it. Freeze barely shows up at all, even though he has a great design, voice actor, and it's very compelling when he does show up. And I understand that there are going to be side characters in these games, but the whole point is the characters. The whole point is the story. So if you take like half of the ones that are interesting and jam them to the back and say these don't matter except when we say they do, I think that that's a missed opportunity for how great the characters are, especially when you see characters that are fully fleshed out in this game, like John Doe, and how well they're written. You know Telltale can write good characters. That's not the point at all. It's just how they're utilized was often disappointing to me. And when talking to one of my friends, something he brought up that I really agree with is I think this problem could have been mitigated if there was just another episode or two to this game. Like, if you were going to have this many characters, you could have put a whole nother 2 episodes in this game, fleshed out some of them over the course of it, and made it feel much more organic as the player went through. Sadly, that didn't happen, but, you know, we got what we got. I also think, as a third point, Alfred specifically is handled extremely poorly the entire game. All of it. And I understand the ideas behind him of having PTSD, sort of, and being unhappy with what's going on, but he's a walking contradiction. He will encourage you to do one thing and then sort of crap on you later for doing that. He whines at every decision you make in the game, and frankly, he ends up annoying. I loved him in the first game. I thought he was fantastic. And at the beginning of this game, he was too, but as it went on, it's like they didn't know how to write him. And that really does play into something that happens later as well. It's just, his whole character arc is one of the biggest blunders I've probably seen in Telltale writing. And that's despite this being my favorite one out of the bunch. It's just weird that they take such a major character and say, let's just turn that on his head and make him something he's not at all. But not in an interesting way. I just don't really get the idea behind it. I also think Tiffany's plot, like her plot twist especially, was terrible. There's a plot twist near the end of the game, which, yes, again, spoiler warning for the end of the game. Here you go. She is the killer. She's the one who actually took out the Riddler early on in the game. Why is that a problem? Well, first off, Tiffany's not actually built up that much throughout the game. She's going through a lot of grief, and her character arc does make sense, but it comes out of left field because they don't develop this idea that she could be a killer at all. In fact, when she finds out that Bruce is even like remotely related to criminals, she calls the police on him. Like, this doesn't really seem too much like someone who would just murder someone in cold blood. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And on top of that, it's something I wonder if it changed in development, because oddly, like, it doesn't make sense. They used John Doe's like character model early on in the game on the bridge, or at least a character model that is extremely, extremely similar to John Doe, in order to show you the outline of, who shot the Riddler. And they make you think, it's John the whole time, and it comes up over and over as a red herring. It's John. It was John. Was it John? I don't know. But what you believe about that doesn't actually matter that much, because the player probably thought the Riddler deserved it anyway. Even if they're playing as Batman, it's like, well, John needs guidance, right? So you probably wouldn't turn on him just for that. So that red herring didn't matter that much. And then later on, they just switch it to Tiffany, even though the character model outline doesn't make any sense for that to have been Tiffany at all. It's just very forced to cause drama. It's very much like something you would see in like a CW show, where it's like, no, actually, your sister was the villain the whole time. And it's like, well, that's not actually that epic or like, whoa, mind-blowing, because you just chucked it out there. It would be like saying, oh no, Alfred was the killer. Okay. Wow. You didn't build that up at all. You just threw it in there, and you expect me to be like surprised and overwhelmed by it. It's not interesting. The final thing I think really, actually, I'm just going to say straight up sucked about this game. Like, I have an actual strong opinion on this entry, and that's that the ending is rushed as all hell. Like, I honestly think the ending of this game is terrible. I think the ending with Joker is great, whether you go vigilante or villain. I don't consider that the very end, even though I really wish it was the very end of the game, especially in the vigilante ending when you're sitting in the warehouse. Like, that would have been a perfect ending to this game, but no, it keeps going, and Alfred, like, really forces, like, an ultimatum on Bruce and says, like, I'm leaving, but then he looks back at you like he wants you to give up being Batman, even though he knows it's bad for Gotham for you to do that. So it comes off extremely selfish for a character that wasn't that at all in Season 1 of the game. He dogged on you, like I said, throughout the entire game, so you don't really care that much if he leaves or not, or at least I didn't. Because you're just like, okay, well, fine, then goodbye. And on top of that, on top of just how much Alfred was butchered throughout the game and even in the ending, the other part of the ending is terrible too, because Catwoman's just gone. Whether you take the time to build up a full relationship with her or not, they just kind of kick her out the door. She's gone. She doesn't matter anymore. They say, well, she's out there in the post-credits, and that's it. It was a terrible way to handle Catwoman in the closing arc, and I honestly do think that there must have been some sort of severe rush for the ending of this game. It makes sense because they sort of developed 2 different episodes for this final episode, depending on if you have Vigilante Joker or Villain Joker. But it's very disappointing because how can you mishandle a character like Alfred so much even in the ending, and you make the player care about Catwoman throughout it, and then she's gone? I just don't really understand what happened here. It really does remind me of something like Knights of the Old Republic 2, actually. The Sith Lords, if you've ever played that. The original release of that game actually had a very cut short ending where you worked with your party the entire time, and then all of a sudden they're just sort of not there anymore. And it was because LucasArts was cutting corners to try to finish by a holiday release. That reminds me a lot of this, where it's like they build up relationships with these characters and then they just chuck them out at the end, and they're like, well, we can't chuck out John Doe, so make sure that one lasts, but these other ones, they're expendable, get rid of them, just get to the ending. And I thought that for a company that prides itself on its writing ability and on writing characters, that is a big disappointment here, at least to me, is that they didn't really know how to handle these characters at the end, or didn't have time to. I'm not sure what it was completely, but either way, I found that to be disappointing. So hey, these are the 5 things that I think that Batman the Enemy Within did not do right. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you disagree with any of these? Do you agree? Why or why not? That's what I love to hear, is actual reasoning, because that's what this is all about. You know, why do you think what you think? And hey, join the Discord for a community of fellow Batman fans, DC Comics fans, Marvel Comics fans, movie fans. We love TV. We love everything in between. Join the Discord to hang out with me and others and talk about stuff. We have a fun community over there. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram. We have a Reddit, a Patreon, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace out, everybody, and stay shway.